Welcome and peace and blessings be upon you, dear viewers of Horn of Africa TV. This is the 5th program in the Somali edition. I'm your host, Mohamed Mohamoud, and I'll be interviewing Professor Mohamed Hassan Ali, who is the political advisor to the head of government in the Somali region of Ethiopia, commonly referred to as Western Somalia or DDS, Dawlad Deegaanka Somalia. Professor Mohamed Hassan is also the honorary president of the Horn of Africa channel and an expert on the affairs of the Horn of Africa. Today, we're broadcasting from Germany and Belgium, and I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you, our viewers and supporters, for your likes, comments, shares, and subscriptions. Our topic today is how the latest changes in the Horn of Africa can impact Somalia, and how Somalia can play a positive role in all of this, if at all. Professor Mohamed Hassan, thank you very much for joining us, and welcome.
Thank you very much, young man. Thank you for inviting me. I hope we will work together in the future. And thank you very much in general.
I hope so too. Can we please start with an introduction of yourself?
I was born in Addis Ababa. I'm a Somali origin. Then I came to Belgium 1980. I'm living in Belgium for the last 41 years. I have been an activist for a very long time. I also been a diplomat for Ethiopia since 1991 until end of 1994. I'm also teaching here. I'm a member of the Labour Party of Belgium. I'm a father of 4 children and I'm a grandfather now. I'm a historian also. I wrote several books. That is my introduction of my life.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. In previous programs, we hosted His Excellency Mr. Hassan Gaalia and Dr. Werner Fasel-Abend. Both of those interviews gave us interesting insights with regard to the relationship between Somalia and Europe. Today, we'll be talking about the relationship between Somalia and its neighbors, Kenya, Eritrea, and Ethiopia. As we learned from your previous interview on Horn of Africa TV, you recently visited Kenya, Eritrea, and Ethiopia. During your time there, there've been many developments, including the return to the capital of Tigray. What were your observations?
First of all, I do believe that it is since 2018 and the demise of the TPLF regime in Ethiopia that the region have started a new history. A new history in the sense that the idea would have existed for the last 60 years to develop of the new Horn of Africa, and this interstate relation and inter-people relation, now it is in the embryo level, but that history is gradually growing. In the past, it had been the regime, particularly the TPLF regime, which is controlling Ethiopia, the biggest country in the whole of Africa, was against the idea of working together with all the states and all the people in the region. In fact, this is an organization which have no longer program, let alone to the whole region of Horn of Africa, but also to itself. We thought that in 1991, a new chapter of history will start after the demise of the military regime in Addis Ababa, but gradually they have went, their reasoning is that they really believe that they are a minority, and the only way to control Ethiopia and to control the region is to be servant for external forces. By allying with external forces and being an agent in the area, and they have shattered the idea of the new Horn of Africa, cooperation between peoples and the states. But I do believe now that situation is gradually developing after the agreement between President Farmajo, Prime Minister Abiy, and President Isaias in Asmara, what they call it the tripartite agreement. And this, of course, had frightened a lot of forces within the imperialist sector, particularly Europe and United States, because they wanted to continue the old project they had. I think Somalia could have been stabilized a very long time. It is not the TPLF also strength which have balkanized Somalia. Somalia is balkanized by the wish of the American oil companies and the American and British and Western policies toward the Somalia. Therefore, now with the change of the environment in the region, I do believe there is a big possibility that the regions can work together and peace can prevail in all those countries. Prime Minister Abiy, since he came to power, he have not followed the same policy of belligerent policy of the TPLF against Somalia by sending small weapons, dividing the Somali warlords and regional warlords and so on, inviting them to Addis Ababa, arming one against the other and so on. All those structures now, of course, have been dismantled, and he is in the process that it is also reintegrate Ethiopia in another way. For that, it is the Somali people should thank him. All the policy of the TPLF have been removed and classified. Of course, it is up to the Somali people to come to agreement among themselves. Previous warlords turned themselves into business people. Still, they think that they wanted to keep their mini market and hustle the Somali people. But Somalis, one have to understand very well, when Somalia got independent, the number of urbanization or the statistically Somalia was not highly urbanized. If you take Somalia, northern Somalia, where the British they have been, the only city they had it was Hargeisa, and it was a very small village. There is no urbanization. Most of the population was pastoralist. And then when you come to the central region, which they call Puntland and so on, and this, it was also thinly. There was no urbanization at all. The pastoralists they used to live. The only place little bit urbanization developed. It is because of the plantation project the Italians have built in Johar around, and then through there laborers and so on, and an embryo of working class have developed because of that plantation. And the second is Mogadishu is an old city. It was not created by the colonialists. It is almost 1,000 years old, but that little bit urbanized and Islamized the city. Majority of the people, for the Somali people, they were rural and pastoralist and semi-pastoralist. So when I visited Mogadishu 2 years ago, and you see the urbanization level of the Somali people have increased because of the civil war, because of the migration, that it is a huge number of Somalis migrated from the country, and so on and so on. And they have, of course, their view of politics, their view of their nation, have changed by interacting with the international community, by living, by having children abroad, and so on and so on. One of them is you. So I think Somalia is not the Somalia of the 60s. Somalia is not the Somalia of 1970s and 80s. And this is a positive development, that the consciousness of the Somali people is daily increasing. The modernization, the view of the people also is no more as before. With experience they have, the interrelation with their neighbors and the bigger neighbor of the Arab world, even beyond that, Turkey and so on, and even Malaysia, all these Islamic areas and so on, as traders, as business people traveling up and down. This brought also another way of reasoning. From that point of view, I see the whole is changing, in a sense that it is the population is getting stronger. The idea of the whole is gradually developing. My visit to the region is most of the people I met, they are younger than 40 years old or little bit older, and some of them even younger than 40. If you look demographically, the majority of the population of the region, more than 70% or almost 70%, they are younger than 40. This is the generation we have to communicate and discuss with them. And this is the generation we lead. If you take the Prime Minister of Ethiopia himself, is in the 40s. It is a young man. When I left, when the change came in 1991, he's only 14, 15 years old. So you could say that it is this generation now who is leading the region, and there must be a communication with this region and with this generation. And this generation is understanding that they need a bigger market of the region. There must be an openness. There must be a cooperation. The region have suffered for the last 60 years unnecessary wars and sacrifice. I hope that it is the region will continue with this new Horn of Africa relationship among the different states and the people. That is what my observation. Also the region have changed in Ethiopia itself, that it is urbanization level become very high. People are aware. They travel a lot, men and women. They have also the Arabic language increased because of the relationship with the Middle East they have. Their exposure became very high. So it is impossible to now to block them and keep them in the villages, and a very few elite can decide in the economic and political situation in the region. That era is over. That is the impression I have.
That's very interesting because it's very similar to the previous two interviews that I mentioned, where both Dr. Werner Fassel-Arbendt and His Excellency Hassan Gaalia both confirmed that this era of European colonialism is coming to an end, and that it is a time of opportunity for all Africans to take advantage of that and maybe perhaps see a change in the relationship between African countries that were set against each other by the colonialists for their own gains. Moving on, the federal government of Ethiopia announced 10 months ago that it had eliminated the TPLF group. For those who don't know, that is the Tigray People's Liberation Front. The Ethiopian government announced that it had, the federal government of Ethiopia, announced that group had been eliminated, and that the government would work towards building what was destroyed by the war in Tigray. However, the TPLF invaded the Amhara and Afar regions. We also heard reports that confrontations between Afar and the Somali brothers have taken place. Do you think that the Ethiopian government hastened its assessment of the situation, or did it not have enough information about the Tigray region and the group that had ruled Ethiopia for 27 years with an iron fist?
First of all, to understand why the Prime Minister announced the end of the war and that TPLF was defeated, one has to go to the history of the building of the Ethiopian army. When the Prime Minister came to power in 2018, 50% of the fighting force within Ethiopia, that is major and down, they were Tigrayans. About 60% of the lieutenant colonels and colonels, they were Tigrayans. 80% of Ethiopian army generals, they were Tigrayans. So exclusively, the Ethiopian army, it have a clause called Ethiopian army, but in reality is a Tigrayan army. Uses the Ethiopian people's tax-paying money, uses the logo of Ethiopia, but all the weapon and all the officers, all the fighting forces, they were Tigrayans. And when they started the war in November the 3rd, their understanding was very simple. If we dominate the army, and we dominate, and we have all the weapon, and about 80% of the weapon is in Tigray, we can wage a war against the Prime Minister, and we can overthrow him and capture Addis Ababa. That is the reasoning. Of course, their masters also told them, you can go to Addis. And it is the time they have chose is November the 3rd. The November the 3rd is not a day, so simply they have chose. They were told to use November the 3rd, eliminate the Ethiopian Federal Army, which is at the border. And that Ethiopian army is at the border is about 32,000. 15,000 of them, they were Tigrayan from that army, one third of it. They killed what they wanted to kill. They took the weapon. Some of them they ran away, the other non-Tigrayans. And then finally, of course, with the remaining army and the Eritrean forces, are forced to enter, and they have reduced the TPLF's army by 74%. But the prime minister, probably because of too much load on his back by the Western countries and United States pushing for ceasefire, probably, I didn't talk to him, but probably that it is, maybe he thought and the assessment he had that TPLF was eliminated. But of course, a war is a very complicated thing. It is not an exact science, and you cannot define a formula on it. Those TPLF elements who remained alive, they were hiding in their holes, and once they got little bit a breathing time, they came out from their holes. The second thing is that it is intoxicated the people of Tigray by an extreme nationalism, fake nationalism. They raised most of the young people in Tigray with a false consciousness. It's like tribalism, as the warlords in Somalia. At that time, they used clanism and inculcate on these young people clan sentiment. And when once you steal their mind from them, they will go and die as a mercenaries for you. It is not the leaders who have died, their wife and children and so on, they were in exile. But those warlords, they were fighting inside Somalia. Their children are not there, their wives are not there. They put them in the Western countries and so on and so on. And they use the poor people of their own clan and organize them that it is, we have our clan cannot be defeated, we have to. But in reality is the interest of this in the name of clan who are fighting in order. The TPLF have inculcated for more than 40 years and 46 years inculcated this fantasy nationalism. It's not nationalism in a sense of nationalism should have a very progressive entity. You can be a nationalist in order to dominate your own market, but at the same time you have to live peacefully with your environment. But this is a very narrow nationalism. Nationalism in a sense is to dominate the others, to wage war on the others and so on. And from that perspective, a lot of young people have been under the umbrella indoctrinated. I hope that it is through time, the war itself will be a lesson to them and they will learn and they will analyze. So now they came back out of their hole and they have captured Makale and so on. But what does it mean is that nothing. They have destroyed the Tigray. They didn't build anything. They were never had a strategy for long term, even for minimum term and so on. They are now using women, children under age and so on, putting them in the front line. Tigray is 6% of Ethiopian population. It is not an agricultural area. It has expanded, elastic itself very bigly and taking the land from the Amharas left and right. And I don't think that you can succeed in such a project. So now they have extended themselves into the Afar region by creating also contradiction with Afar and the Somali region, which will be eliminated. It is already defeated now in that area. They have extended themselves also into the Amhara region, which now one by one, they are losing that area, which means the problem in Tigray that there is no, for the moment, a progressive organization which counter TPLF and destroy the narrative of TPLF. And the Tigrayan people is paying the bill in such a difficult situation they were put in. But I hope that as a people, they might emerge of a new force to save the Tigray from this diabolic fascist type organization. And the people of Tigray can reintegrate again with their brothers and sisters with Ethiopians. And then it will be part also of the new Horn of Africa that we can work. Personally, I don't think that Prime Minister Abiy have a personal grudge against the people of Tigray. He himself speaks Tigrinya. As a young man, as an officer, he lived in Tigray. In that area, he knows the people of Tigray and so on. I don't think he have any grudge against the people of Tigray. So it is majority of the Ethiopian people also. They don't like TPLF, but they have no special grudge against the people of Tigray. And I'm sure whatever they have, they committed a lot of crime everywhere in Ethiopia and in the Somali region and so on. But this is not a contradiction people to people. This is a contradiction of a very small minority bandits and the majority of the population in Ethiopia. So without TPLF, I think the region will go faster. The integration will be very faster. And TPLF is not representative of Tigrayan people. It is a representative of external forces who doesn't want that the region to go and to start a new relationship. So TPLF must be destroyed in order to have the new Horn of Africa, where all the peoples and states in the region work together in security, in economics, and all other affairs. I think it is the demise of TPLF will be very soon, and I'm looking forward for it.
Yes, it's very interesting because it's difficult for these kind of organizations to exist permanently, no matter who's supporting them. So I think after the fall of the TPLF government in 2018, there's been a massive decline in their influence anyway. And we saw the beginning of the peace process between Eritrea and Ethiopia, which Somalia later joined. We saw a commitment from all sides to improve the relations and to increase cooperation. What do you think are the obstacles that stand in the way of achieving peace in the Horn of Africa?
I think the major obstacle is TPLF. If TPLF is dead, will be the major cancer, it means is eliminated. The other is technical one. The other is technical one, provided that the three states works together in security and transportation and agriculture and other aspects and so on. Gradually, I think the small obstacles will be resolved. For example, the situation in Somalia, the contradiction between the small states who have a lot of money in their hand because of certain oil they have discovered, like the Emirates and the Qatars. They are playing with fire. First of all, they are a very small nation. Suddenly in history that they have a lot of oil in their ground and they accumulated a lot of money. And this made them to be crazy, and they thought that they are an imperialist force. They are not an imperialist force. They have money in there or cash in their hand, but their society still is a backward society. Secondly, they wanted to have their influence and so on, and they wanted to impose their will on the states and the people on the region. They should have learned what Kuwait did in the 90s. Kuwait also tried to play beyond its capacity. And finally, she have eaten a good lesson when Iraq invaded and throw away the ruling families and created a lot of misery for the Kuwaitians. I think the prediction with the Western historians, they predict now that there is a possibility of collapse of the United Arab Emirates and Qatar because of their arrogance they think that they can, in Arabic, they call it tamaddud, that with their money they can expand and dominate countries with peoples with a long tradition and history and so on. So I really advise them that they should, particularly United Arab Emirates, should keep distance, and instead of the young generation who are ruling United Arab Emirates, they are very foolish people. They don't see politics in a longer term, the damage brings to them. Therefore, when their grandfather was ruling United Arab Emirates, he was a traditional man and wise man, and he had a very strong relationship with Somalia. But this younger one, they are thinking like the think tank of the imperialist forces, and they really believe that money can buy everything. And I do believe that they are making a very serious mistake, but their time will be very limited. And probably they are also afraid that the greater Horn of Africa, if they cooperate and so on, they think they can be isolated. But that's not true. We can integrate them in our greater market. They can share. They are our brothers and sisters. They are our neighbors. We have no antagonism against them, but their thinking is Middle Age thinking. They want to dominate and so on. They think that they wanted to create a colony in the 21st century. Their thinking is very, very backward. And now they were defeated from Yemen and they ran away from Yemen, the Emirates. And I'm surely that they will pay the price for what they are doing. I'm advising them to be normal country, to be integrated with the region. They can play important role and they can invest in the region and they can have a benefit and so on by creating jobs for the young people and so on. But unfortunately, they want to dominate and they wanted to create a slave and a master relationship in the Horn of Africa. That is not possible. The people are very proud. They respect themselves. They are independent mind. I don't think that it is this little night shops of Qatar and United Arab Emirates can dominate 200 million of the Horn of Africa. I don't think so. They are really dreaming and they will spend.
No, it's not possible, I think, for them to dominate the region and to try to apply the strategies that were applied against them by the colonialist masters to then try to do the same thing to another group of people. It's not going to work.
They are very shallow, shallow, and they are shooting in their feet. They are part of the region. We have a very interlinked historical relationship with them. It is for 1,000 years we were dealing with them and so on. But this is like a spoiled child who grow up with a lot of wealth and money and who doesn't know how to use his money and his wealth. And for me, their political involvement in the region is a childish political involvement. Particularly, for example, what they do in Somalia to divide this and distribute money there and there, being behind the Kenyans, and then it is encouraging the Kenyans to destabilize Somalia and Jubaland and so on. I think this history will tell in the future. The Somali people are noting that. And to come to a question that the stability of the Horn of Africa will increase day to day. I don't think this wave of history can be stopped. They can maybe delay it a little bit, but it cannot be stopped. It's a new wind is blowing in the Horn of Africa, and that wind, new wind will be led by young people of your generation, and I don't think it can be stopped. It is a dreamer if somebody involved on that. But they are losing a lot of money and they are creating obstacles for the region. But what I believe is once the TPLF demise, the region will have peace for a very long time. We suffered too much, and that region needs a new start in order to build, particularly your generation, to build a new relationship, Once the population will have an access of health, access of water, access of schooling, transportation will be easy, that the intermingling of the young people like you and the others, that you will develop a new vision, you will see the region differently. There will be tourism among the population when so people can visit Mogadishu, can visit in Somalia, Bosaso, wherever it is, Kismayo and this. The reverse also, people can visit Ethiopia, Eritrea, and so on. And this culturally, linguistically, economic integration, it will be the benefit of all of us. And I hope that the people of Sudan also will be part of this project. And then it is a very big market. So I think migration will get less, that we have the biggest livestock in the world. We have a good agricultural land. There is a lot of water in the whole of Africa. There is the human resources and so on. If these countries want really seriously to invest and work with us, we will welcome them. But domination, that will not be acceptable, I think.
No, I often compare the potential of the Horn of Africa with Europe. So when you look at the history of Europe, the recent history of Europe in the First and Second World War, there was unimagined killing and suffering, and within one generation, they turned that around. They managed to stabilize the region, recreate peace, and now have an air of cooperation, and they cooperate with one another. Although we see a disintegration of the EU, we won't have the same problem. I think we have far less grudges towards one another, far less killing between one another, and far less imperialistic behavior towards one another. So I think it's very easy to heal from the wounds of the past that were inflicted both amongst one another, and were also engineered by external forces. I think it would be very easy to overcome that and to have a new era of cooperation with everyone keeping of course, their unique national identity, but cooperating much more openly, much more freely for the good of all. How do you think the latest events will affect? So this is going to be a kind of a selfish question. How do you think the latest events will affect Somalia and all Somalis in the region, including Djibouti, NFD, DDS, or Western Somalia? And what role, if any, can the Somali nation play in the future of the region?
First of all, Somalis live in a very big area of the whole of Africa. Somali nationalism, or Somali nationalism in the way is understood in the past and now, are different. Somalis are not minority. They live in a very big part of the Horn of Africa. Therefore, they are the champion of the new Horn of Africa. It is in the interest of the Somalis to be in the front line and to demand the new Horn of Africa. The new Horn of Africa will unify the Somali people and unify the Horn of Africa. Economically, the Somalis today are doing good. They have a very big resources. They have a very big area. Why Somalis have to demand the Balkanization of the whole of Africa? Somalis, they should be in the front line to say, we want a new Horn of Africa. As you have mentioned correctly, you said that the wound is very small and it is not deep. We never killed each other for a very long time and so on, as Europe, you put it perfectly. Somalis, they should be the front line to say that Ethiopia must be stable, and the Horn of Africa must be stable, because we wanted to build a train from Mogadishu to Asmara, from Mogadishu to Khartoum. The big part of Somali-speaking area in Ethiopia is a very big territory, is a Somali-speaking area. In Kenya, so we can enmangle the Kenyan population itself, the Kukuyus, the Luyas, and so on. These are our brothers and sisters. And Somalia have more than 3,300 kilometers coast, even more when you add even the coast of the part of the Somali-speaking area in Kenya is very big. So we can sell our fish to the whole Horn of Africa. Eritrea can sell that. We look alike and so on. We, the Somalis, they kept us, and one of the process for dividing the Somalis on the clan base is that Somalis must to understand they are the frontline state for the Horn of Africa business. So we Somalis, Horn of Africa project, it is our advantage in everything sensitive. Not to dominate anybody. If you build a highway from, let us say, from Gilgit to Mogadishu, and you only speak Somali language and you reach there, that means that it is the natural, the normal Horn of Africa, the historical Horn of Africa is coming back. In the past for 60, 70 years and even 80 years, from above was engineered that it is these people not to meet each other. Our religions is closed, our culture is closed, the region is Christians and Muslims live. We have a historical relation, our languages is closed and so on and so on. So why not? We Somalis, we should be in the front line to say we want the new Horn of Africa on the basis of equality, fraternity, and so on. And we trade and we work with all the people in the region. And we should refuse any external force to intervene, whether from near or from far, and then use our resources. So the Somalis live in a very big region, they are a huge population, and so on. We don't have a complex that it is to think in terms of closing our windows and our doors and so on. No, we are for the Horn of Africa, and once Horn of Africa comes, peace prevails, and when peace prevails, economy grow, and your generation has to deal with that. That is the way I see the Horn of Africa.
Me too. I hope for that time to be soon. Thank you so much, Professor Mohamed Hassan. It really was a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, young man. I hope we will continue making our discussion to reach our young Somalis, Ethiopians, and Eritreans, and so on. Next week, maybe if I'm here, I'm going, I think, to Spain for with my family. If it's not possible next week, when I come back, we will do together about Somalia, specific program on the history of Somali people, and then how is Somalia state independent, what was the obstacle the first government of Somalia faced, why later on is a change came, on the alphabetization and the discussion of the languages, the script of the language we'll discuss, why Latin was chosen, then later on why the military took over the power, and this it will be educational. Between me and you, there is a I'm your father. So like a son and a father speak to each other. Both of us, we are in exile. What brought us? What is the problem? And then we can narrate together. You can ask me, we can discuss me and you. And the purpose of it is that the young people like you and the people who are younger than you and so on, mashallah, you are an engineer, you are an educated man. Then later on, you also narrate to your own children. So let us build something, a generational discussion. My generation, there is a generation of your father, I'm younger than your father, your generation, and maybe your children's generation, and so forth. We have to develop a sort of a dialogue among themselves and discuss. Mashallah, you are an engineer and so on, you are an educated young man, you are a Western man with, and at the same time Somali. You see the world differently than I see probably. Maybe I'm closer to you and the others much closer to you. So in this way, we can make several programs and then we will make a discussion with our community. We can make it if you want in Somali or in English, but majority, they live in England, United States, in the West, they prefer, because they speak English. So we'll do it in English, 3-4 programs. And then, yeah. And thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for watching. I look forward to seeing you all on the next program. Peace.